And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could I get away with this social media profile pic with only one bleach spot on my shirt? And with the ever-expanding Marvel Universe movies more popular than ever, could I pitch my most recent superhero idea entitled The Road Rager? And now, the podcast host who always keeps his cool behind the wheel, especially when it's in the shed, Pete Dominic!
Yes, of course, Pico. You never want to lose your head when you're out on the road. That is for sure. Take my new No More Road Rage America class, available everywhere. Well, hello and welcome to episode 521 of Stand Up. Joining me today, the great professor of media and communications from the New School. It's Jeff Jarvis and my regular Monday conversation with Maura, Quint. I hope you had an awesome weekend. Thank you to everybody who came out to our show. Ophira Eisenberg, Kristen Finnegan, and I did go through with the performance. Sold-out show on Saturday night in Pennsylvania. Great to see so many listeners there. Chris Metka and John Fleming and Carl Halterman and their parties. Thank you guys for coming out. And if anybody I forgot, I'm sorry, but I really loved meeting so many people. And we had great sets, and I'm not sure if we got COVID or not, but I talk a little bit more about the show in my conversation with Maura Quint today. But here we are at the beginning of the third week of January. Today, if you're listening on Monday, Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King, of course, celebrations and service projects taking place all over the country. In the Northeast, we got a good bit of snow. I think there was weather down south as well. I'm seeing a lot of pictures from my friends down in Atlanta with a little snow on the ground. So I hope you had a good weekend. I've got tons of news because it is a Sunday. I didn't want to take today off because it was a busy news weekend. And hey, I'm snowed in. So let's do it, shall we? Great show coming your way. Time for The Last 24. Coming at you from the solar-powered shed behind my house in Rockland County. Snow falling. It's beautiful out there. Indy and I are warm and cozy in the shed, and today's show is brought to you, as it is every day, by paid subscribers like you, and welcome to a whole bunch of new subscribers over the weekend and last week. Great to have you, and if you're not signed up with a paid subscription to Stand Up, you are missing out. Go to standupwithpete.com right now to support this daily show and tell your friends. All right, well, it is Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Why can't I get that right? And MSNBC's Vaughn Hilliard caught up with Martin Luther King III, as well as Andrea Waters King, and asked them what they thought of Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema's refusal to allow Joe Biden's voting rights agenda. They were all in Arizona for a march, as was the disgraced former president, Donald Trump, for a rally over the weekend. Here's about 2.5 minutes of that exchange, which I thought was real good.
Well, Arizona, in one sense, is near ground zero. I say near because, unfortunately, there are 19 states that have passed regressive laws, including our own state of Georgia. And we believe that as it relates to getting these bills passed, that Senator Sinema has been one of the challenges. And so it made sense to come to Arizona. Some regressive laws, we feel, have been put in place that make it harder for people to vote.
Senator Sinema took to the Senate floor there, and she fiercely defended her position on this, saying that her fear would be that if Republicans were to take the Senate majority, that there would be a reversal, and that they would pass even more stringent voter ID measures. They could even roll back all mail-in voting here. When you heard her floor speech, what was on your mind, and what is your response?
Would you like to?
No, you can go.
Okay. First of all, I was just greatly disappointed that you stand in the way and have the gall to not realize that what is being done in all of these states, it's about the filibuster, And yet every last one of these states that have passed these regressive laws have done it with all Republican legislators, not bipartisan. So that to me seems to be not a sufficient argument. It is certainly always anyone's right to do what they want to, but the people, I feel, in fact, in this nation, 64% of the people support voting rights protections and expansion.
You guys had...
And also your father was here in Arizona in 1964.
I believe it right over here at this church, if I'm not mistaken.
Then that if the filibuster was not to be eliminated, the health of our nation was at harm.
Could I ask, you guys have been at this for decades now. You not as many decades, but you know the fights that have been endured here. And the question is, what comes next? There's a very real reality that state legislatures in Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona could pass more stringent measures even this year, but in 2023, 2024, where does this fight go from here? Georgia already passed its sweeping measure. Texas already the same. What do you tell the people around this country who are looking to get in on this fight that you guys are here today on behalf of? What do you tell them?
Make their voices heard, that we have to have federal voting rights protection laws passed, and we must have them passed now. You can go to deliverforvotingrights.com. You need to call your senators. You need to sign petitions and make your voices heard on this matter.
All right, members of the King family on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And now here's one of the many Republicans who is standing in the way of restoring what Dr. King died for, the dream, the Voting Rights Act that's been gutted by the Supreme Court and Republicans, as well as a couple of Democrats that don't support restoring it with a simple majority in the Senate. This is Bill Cassidy. He was on CNN with Jake Tapper on State of the Union this week. He says basically racism is over because black people have been really successful in a lot of different places.
Now, if anyone can't see that circumstances have changed, they're just not believing their lying eyes. The reality is that in Louisiana, we have the highest percent of African-American officials in the nation. We've had a white mayor of a predominantly black city and a black mayor of a predominantly white city. There's been incredible progress in our country. There's more to do. Absolutely. We need safeguards. But to argue we are still the same as we were in 1965 is to deny facts that are clearly before us.
But isn't the argument not that it's the same as 1965, but that discrimination and prejudices continue to exist? Voting rights activists will point to, for example, the state of Texas moved to ban drive-through and 24-hour early voting, which were heavily used by minority voters in 22, to limit the number of drop boxes to just one per county. In Georgia, where the Atlanta region went from having more than 100 drop boxes to just 23, and where there's strict new ID requirements for absentee ballots that disproportionately impact minority voters. And beyond that, there were some of the pieces of legislation that were parts of those voting reform packages in Texas and Georgia that did not ultimately pass, but seemed to really have ill intent at their root. For example, banning Sunday voting, which would have disproportionately affected souls to the polls movements by black churches to go from church to get people to vote, ultimately didn't become law, but that really alarmed a lot of people at what the intent might have been.
I don't know what to say. This proves the system works.
Oh, there's nothing to say. That's why he has nothing to say. It doesn't prove the system works. Senator Bill Cassidy, what a lame answer. He's got nothing right there. These two voting rights bills that are currently stalled in Congress are crucial. And while they've passed out of the House, they've fallen short so far in the Senate. And on Velshi over the weekend, he had two attorneys general, one from Michigan and one from Pennsylvania on his show, Shapiro and Dana Nessel in Michigan. Attorney General Josh Shapiro is actually running for governor there in Pennsylvania. But here is Dana Nessel on why we need federal legislation to ensure that a vice president can't simply pick an alternative false slate of electors that was never properly certified through the state. Here she is.
You have issues in your own states, and I'm trying to figure out whether some of those things that you're contending with could be dealt with by these two pieces of federal legislation that are proposed. Attorney General Nessel in Michigan, a Republican-backed petition to restrict voting access might be able to circumvent the governor's initial veto if it gets enough signatures. And I guess I'm trying to figure out what's to stop Republicans from utilizing an option like that to continue to roll voting rights back. Is this a place where federal legislation could help?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we so badly need these bills to be passed. There's no question that because we have this, honestly, very anti-democratic means of having a bill become law in Michigan and circumventing the veto by Governor Whitmer, it's only a very, very small percentage of people that need to sign on to that bill, as long as the Republicans who are in the majority in the House and Senate go ahead and pass it by a mere majority vote. Interestingly enough, the Michigan House and Senate doesn't have a problem with passing major legislation with just a majority. There's no 60 person rule that we have. But what it essentially will do is it'll make it much more difficult to vote both, absentee and also to have your vote count in person. And those would be addressed federally. But the issue that you raised about Mike Pence basically opening the envelopes and counting the votes, as you know, there were 7 states that offered an alternative false set of electors, including my state. And that's something that we really need some sort of federal legislation to ensure that a vice president can't just simply pick an alternative false slate of electors that was never properly certified through the state.
All right, well, there's a lot more conversation on all of the Sunday shows and across the media spectrum, the spectrum of media, from podcasts to YouTube. Everybody is talking about these voting rights bills and why they are so necessary and so needed and what to do about them. But I'm going to move on to another issue as we continue to debate and hopefully get something done and out of the Senate, although it does seem bleak. It's time for something else bleak. It's time for COVID news. COVID news and headlines and related audio. Here's a headline I saw. Cloth face masks won't cut it against Omicron, says expert. More data and public health experts saying the quality of face masks can vary widely. Didn't we know that? That's being emphasized now as the Omicron variant has been found to be significantly more transmissible than previous COVID-19 variants. N95 and KN95 masks reserved for healthcare workers are considered especially efficient at air filtration when compared to cloth masks made of cotton. Touched on that with Jeff Jarvis in my conversation today. While America is struggling to keep schools open, the new governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, has ended mandates on his first day. Ended mandates for masks in schools and COVID vaccinations for state workers. So another Republican governor, I guess, making it worse in the name of phony freedom. The U.S. Surgeon General warns that Omicron has not yet peaked. I'll play some of him for you in a moment. Insurance is now covering at-home COVID tests. Americans who have health insurance are entitled to receive up to 8 rapid at-home COVID tests per household member per month for free under new Biden administration policy that took effect Saturday. We got tests given to us from our school, but they were already expired. They expired January 2022, and I'm not sure if that's the state's fault or whose fault is that, but a lot of people in my town are kind of upset by that. Teachers in France have staged a mass walkout over COVID protocols, and students have walked out of class over Omicron concerns as well. Hundreds at Boston, Chicago, and other U.S. school districts that staged these walkouts on Friday, demanding a return to remote instruction so that they could cheat their faces off again. And Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic left Australia Sunday night after a court ruling upheld the immigration minister's decision to cancel his visa. He traveled to Australia January 5th, but was denied entry. The number 1 tennis player in the world can't play in one of the top 3 tournaments of the world because he refuses to get vaccinated, this jackass. I talked with Jeff Jarvis about him as well. Now let me get to some COVID-related audio. Here is the United States of America U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He talked with Jay Tapper on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday morning.
Dr. Murthy, thanks so much for joining us. So case numbers have soared past 800,000 cases per day for the first time today. Hospitalizations are the highest they've ever been. Are we at the peak of this surge right now, do you think? Or if not, when do you think we should expect the peak to come?
Well, Jake, this is a very difficult time during this surge. We are seeing high case numbers and hospitalization rates, as you mentioned, and we're also seeing strain in many of our hospitals around the country. But the good news is that there are parts of the country, New York in particular, and other parts of the Northeast, where we are starting to see a plateau and in some cases an early decline in cases. The challenge is that the entire country is not moving at the same pace. The Omicron wave started later in other parts of the country, so we shouldn't expect a national peak in the next coming days. Next few weeks will be tough. But, Jake, this is also why it's so important that we are surging resources to hospitals that are struggling. It's why it's so important that we all double down on precautions that we're taking. Because one thing that we're learning during this surge is that our vaccines are still working very well to keep people out of the hospital and to save their lives. It's why we want everyone to get vaccinated, to get boosted as soon as they can.
All right, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. Also, Jay Tapper pushed him a bit on the issues surrounding tests.
Tests were only available 43 times. That's just 9% of the time. We're nearly 2 years into this pandemic. President Biden has been in office for almost a full year. Would you agree it's not yet at an acceptable level?
Well, Jake, as the president said, we certainly have more we need to do on testing. And that's a message that's very clear from him to the public, to his team, that we need to pull every lever possible.
All right, there you go. That is the Surgeon General, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy on CNN's State of the Union. Now, let's go to one of Smart Cousin Darcy's favorite guests, favorite experts. It is Dr. Michael Osterholm. He was on Weekend Today to discuss the Omicron surge's potential peak, as well as new guidelines around mask wearing and more. But I'll give you the audio from those first 2 points, which I think this guy is always right on. And, well, so is Smart Cousin Darcy.
You said that Omicron could be a, quote, viral blizzard. And now here we are, more than 1 million cases a day. And yet we are starting to see that case number drop in some cities and states. So how long do you think it will be before we peak?
Well, when I first suggested this was going to be a viral blizzard, it was about 5 weeks ago. And I said that it would be up through 8 to 9 weeks that this would happen. And we're right on target for that. I think that you're going to see, in fact, as you note, in the Northeast in particular, the case numbers may have peaked. But remember, that still means a lot of cases are coming in every day. Nationwide, I think we're at least 3 to 4 weeks off before we see that peak and the numbers start to drop. I'd also remind people that it doesn't mean it's over with at that time. If you look at South Africa, the numbers went up very, very quickly and then came down quickly, but there's still about 25 times the number of cases now in South Africa today than there were before the Omicron peak started. So it doesn't mean that it ends in 3 or 4 weeks. It just means that the numbers will come down, I think, quite substantially.
And Dr. Osterholm, about the changing mask guidance from the CDC now saying it's okay to wear those N95 or KN95 masks. There had been concern about shortages of them in the past. So simply put, what is your message to those Americans who are still wearing the surgical or cloth masks at this point?
Well, at this point, I have to say I'm glad to see that the CDC has made some movement. It's far too late. We knew a year ago that they should be wearing N95s as a routine and that there were plenty of them in this country. So, I welcome the new news, but it surely is late in coming. Second of all, the recommendations are, I best call tepid. They mean you can wear them. I don't think that's right. I think you must wear them. This virus is highly infectious, and cloth face coverings and even surgical masks are just not adequate in keeping it out. So my message is you can do a lot to protect yourself by wearing a tight face-fitting N95. You will not be taking them from other healthcare workers. We have plenty right now. And this is an important step in protecting yourself in addition to being vaccinated.
All right, there he is, Dr. Michael Osterholm on the Today Show. And speaking of Smart Cousin Darcy, she also turned me on to this great epidemiologist, Dr. Caitlin Jetelina. And she sat down with, Dr. Jetelina sat down with my friend Soledad O'Brien on her show Matter of Fact. And Soledad asks great questions. I have subscribed to her YouTube page now and to Dr. Jetelina. And she asked her, including about the future of COVID and it going from pandemic to endemic.
Does your picture of the future look like the pandemic sort of just becoming endemic? Again, a scenario where we talk about COVID like we talk about a very bad cold or a mild, manageable flu.
Yeah, the future is going to be endemic. And we know that COVID-19 is becoming milder, not necessarily because it's mutating that direction, but just because of our immunity. This immunity, both vaccine-induced and even infection-induced, dampens disease by shortening the time of infection, reducing the amount of virus in your nasal passageway, and reducing symptoms and disease. The other thing that I think we're going to start slowly seeing is that we're starting to start seeing the seasonality. So we know coronaviruses, other ones, are seasonal. They pick up in the winter and they drop down in the summer, just like we see with the flu. And I really think we're going to start seeing that with COVID-19. But hopefully the rest of the year is relatively mild.
Dr. Caitlin Jetelina joining us. Thank you so much. Your newsletter is terrific.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, epidemiologist Dr. Caitlin Jetelina on Soledad O'Brien's YouTube channel called Matter of Fact. And now let's move on to some violence over the weekend in North Carolina. Shopping mall shooting left 2 adults and 1 child dead. Wilmington police chief says the suspect being treated for a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Somehow, I guess he survived. And then, of course, you probably heard about what happened at a synagogue in Texas where an FBI hostage rescue team had to storm a Texas synagogue Saturday night, ending an almost 11-hour standoff with a hostage taker who claimed to have a bomb and may have ties to Al-Qaeda. Here is CNN's Pamela Brown with the breaking news story over the weekend.
Some breaking news now on the dramatic hostage rescue in Texas. CNN has learned the identity of the suspect. The FBI identifying him just a few moments ago as 44-year-old Malik Faisal Akram, a British citizen. Akram was killed in a tense, nearly 11-hour standoff at a synagogue in the town of Colleyville. Investigators say he entered the congregation Beth Israel Synagogue during Saturday morning Sabbath services and then took the rabbi and 3 others hostage as those services were being live streamed. 1 hostage was released several hours into that standoff, and after hours of negotiations, an elite FBI rescue team then breached the synagogue, freeing those remaining hostages. The president today calling the case an act of terror.
I spoke this morning with the Attorney General and to get a rundown on, he said there was overwhelming cooperation with the local authorities and the FBI, and they did one hell of a job. This was an act of terror. This was an act of terror.
All right, there's the president and CNN's Pamela Brown. Well, my friend Elie Velshi spoke to another guy I really like and gotten to know pretty well, Jonathan Greenblatt, who is the head of the Anti-Defamation League, on his show on over the weekend. Here's Jonathan Greenblatt with Velshi.
You and I talked the other day about this normalization of this sort of behavior, and credit to all the people who brought this to an end. But there was a strange comment made by the FBI special agent in charge who said that the hostage taker was specifically focused on an issue, i.e. the release of this prisoner, that was not directly connected to the Jewish community, and then there was no immediate indication that the man was a part of any broader plan. But this is what you and I talked about. Whether or not this had anything to do with Jews, the Jewish community, he decided to go into a place that was a Jewish space where there would be Jews. And you and I discussed the fact that this is the problem, right? You don't want people randomly deciding that their grievances in life need to be taken out on Jews. That's actually the basis of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're raising the issue. I mean, I think the SAC and the FBI did such amazing work. But make no mistake, when this woman, when a jury was being impaneled in 2010 in her case, and let's remind people, she was charged. She's serving 86 years, as you said, 7 counts of terrorism, including firing on American troops and taking surveillance photos of American institutions and threatening harm against Americans. In her jury selection, Afia Siddiqui said in public, Ali, that, quote, the jurors should be genetically tested so that we know there are no Israelis or Zionists among them. And then after her trial, when she was found guilty and the verdict was read in court, her exclamation that she said out loud in front of everyone was, quote, this isn't a verdict in America, it's a verdict in Israel. So this is bizarre. I can assure you that this synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, has nothing to do with some broad Jewish conspiracy. But in the mind of these extremists, in the mind of these anti-Semites, they always look to blame the Jews. And this man did not target a 7-Eleven. He didn't target a grocery store. He went to a synagogue for a reason, to make a point that Jews are vulnerable, that Jews are part of the problem. And this is why this vicious anti-Semitism needs to be confronted by every, all sectors of society.
All right, Jonathan Greenblatt explaining it very well with Elie Velshi on MSNBC over the weekend. And finally, one more story I just want to get you some audio from, and this is the upcoming war in Russia. Ukraine, Russia, whether or not it's going to happen is anybody's best guess, but it is really disconcerting what's going on over there. I'll probably be talking to an expert on the show about it this week, although there's so many different analysts and hard to know who is the best on this issue or what the best way forward is. I'll probably just end up talking to Bill B in D.C. He's always good about this stuff. But I would love to hear if there's somebody that you think I should be talking to when it comes to Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine. Anyway, I thought this was a great setup by MSNBC's Ayman Mohyeldin, kind of laying out where we're at right now with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Earlier today, Ukraine was hit with a massive cyber attack that targeted government websites. Visitors to those sites were met with a message that read in part, "Be afraid and expect the worst." And authorities here, while authorities have not concluded that Russia carried out the attack, it is consistent with similar attacks seen prior to, Russia's invasion of Georgia back in 2008, for example. In addition, U.S. intelligence is now suggesting that Russia is preparing a false flag operation in order to rationalize an invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. official tells NBC News, quote, "We have information that indicates Russia has already pre-positioned a group of operatives to conduct a false flag operation in eastern Ukraine. The operatives are trained in urban warfare and in using explosives to carry out acts of sabotage against Russia's own proxy forces." U.S. officials also accuse Russia of ramping up disinformation campaigns in order to lay groundwork for a possible invasion, one that would paint Ukraine as the aggressor, not Russia. Russia was acting maybe perhaps in self-defense. Russia also relied on a similar disinformation campaign right before its invasion of Crimea back in 2014, just as a way to justify that very attack. To quote one senior U.S. diplomat, "The drumbeat of war is sounding loud." And so far, we should note that talks between the West and Russia have failed to de-escalate the situation. So what, if anything, can be done at this point?
All right, there you go. Dwindling democracy, COVID, Russia, Ukraine, audio, lots of other stories happening over the weekend. And I'm going to give you some of the headlines rapid fire style and what we lovingly call the news dump here on Stand Up. And another news dump jingle, an original from an original Pete Co. And lyrics apparently by the great Dan McDonald, Danny Mac.
When it comes to saving lives, he was no mugwump. He's the landmine-sniffing hero rat on today's news dump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sad story about the landmine-sniffing rat that died. It died of natural causes, though. It didn't actually die of a landmine. It did its job. And thanks, guys, Dan and Pete. Very well done. All right, what kind of news dump stories do we have for you? Already mentioned the governor of Virginia was sworn in, Glenn Youngkin, and one of his first executive orders was to ban the use of divisive concepts like critical race theory in public education, because that's really going to make people's lives different in Virginia. Just such an unbelievable embarrassment. Over 2,400 flights were canceled on Sunday as a winter storm struck the East Coast. The extent of the tsunami damage in the Polynesian archipelago nation of Tonga remains unclear as ash obstructs the view from the sky, and the submarine cable that connects Tonga to the outside world remains out of commission. New Zealand's government's pledged the equivalent of around $340,000 to aid in recovery, with a promise of more to follow. Tonga was struck by a tsunami Saturday after an undersea volcano erupted 40 miles south of the capital city. Did you hear about it? This is a wild story over the weekend. The entire Pacific was on warning for a tsunami because of an undersea volcano. President Trump went to a rally in Arizona. It was absolutely crazy. I'll play a clip from it with Maura, and we'll talk about how nuts that was. The Supreme Court is expected to hear a case of a high school football coach who was fired for praying on the field. They said this Friday that they'd be hearing the case of Joe Kennedy, who lost his job as a high school football coach for praying with players after games. Bremerton School District in Washington State fired him in 2015, so we'll definitely be talking about that one this week. And Charles McGee was a Tuskegee Airman. He flew 409 fighter combat missions over 3 wars and later helped to bring attention to the black pilots who battled racism at home, the fight for freedom abroad. He died on Sunday. He was 102. And guess what? Charles McGee, who flew 409 combat missions over 3 wars, died in his sleep at his home in Bethesda, Maryland, according to his son. I'm going to look into this guy's story. What a fascinating life he must have led. And YouTube has pulled one of the most influential conservative talkers, Don Bongino's channel, over a video the Fox News host posted claiming masks are useless against the coronavirus. The video violated YouTube's policies on COVID-19 misinformation, according to a spokesman Friday night, resulting a first strike against the channel, according to the Daily Beast. First strike brings a 1-week suspension. Scientific consensus, of course, on masks that they are effective in reducing the spread of the virus, and YouTube policy specifically prohibits saying otherwise. The early Monday morning hours, North Korea apparently fired 2 more suspected ballistic missiles into the sea in its 4th weapons launch this month, according to South Korea's military, with the apparent goal of demonstrating its military might amid paused diplomacy with the United States and pandemic border closures. So, yeah, North Korea firing their 4th projectile this month alone. All right, what else can I tell you? Astronomers found a second moon outside of Milky Way. The first exomoon was identified by the same team of astronomers in 2018. Moon is apparently orbiting a planet in another galaxy, a discovery that has only been made one time before. Data about the new moon was gathered by NASA's Kepler Space Telescope before it was retired in 2018. Scientists cannot actually see the moon, but estimated that it's over 2.5 times larger than Earth and orbiting a Jupiter-sized gas planet. So that sounds like a fun job to do, just finding moons. What'd you do today? I found a moon orbiting a gas planet. What did you do? Oh, nothing. Nothing like that. All right, DirecTV apparently announced, this is important news, a big news story, that they are not going to renew their contract with One America News Network, which is this far-right conspiracy racist outlet favored by former President Trump. DirecTV, which is owned by AT&T, told The Hill they've been notified, the owner of OAN, that the contract between the network and the service provider will not be renewed. The end of the contract could dramatically affect the network. DirecTV is its largest distributor. That is very big and good news that a lot of people probably won't know about or hear about, but good reporting on that. And I told it to you here on the News Dump, which is why you should listen. And one more. This is a good story. UCLA researchers are coming closer to finding a possible cure for HIV. The study opens a new paradigm for a possible HIV cure in the future, according to the study's lead author. In recent studies, scientists were able to eradicate HIV in 40% of HIV-infected mice. Globally, 38 million people are currently living with HIV, and an estimated 36 million have died of HIV-related cases since the 1980s. Actually, Maura, Quint and I talk a little bit about how the concern of HIV, I think, in our conversation today, for sure. All right, well, that's all I've got for you on today's News Dump. And now it is time to get to my guests. Very excited every time I get the opportunity to talk to both these folks. Both of them are regulars here on the show. I always have new guests every week. I always have regular guests, people that I've known that I think are brilliant. And I always have Maura Quint on Mondays. So I'm going to do that. Jeff Jarvis coming up of the New School. Had a great conversation with Jeff about a wide-ranging number of issues. But first, we start with Maura Quint. She is the campaign chair at Americans for Tax Fairness. That's AmericansForTaxFairness.org. She joins me almost every Monday here on the show. She is a hilarious and brilliant writer. She's been published in The Onion, McSweeney's, New Yorker, and so much more. She's appeared on panels on all kinds of YouTube shows and podcast shows and cable shows, and we love talking to her and having the opportunity to talk to her almost every Monday here. She is so good that she's got her own jingle, which I'm about to play for you. You can follow her on Twitter, where she's very popular, at Behind Your Back. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to talk to Maura Quint because it's that time of the week.
When regressive taxation has gone too far and your Bloody Mary's just not up to par, it's Maura Monday.
Yes, I'm very excited. It's that time of week. It's the beginning of the week. It's the only thing to look forward to on Mondays is that I get to talk to Maura Quint and share it with all of you. Hello, my friend. Happy Sunday Monday.
Happy Sunday Monday to you. Nice to be talking to you.
You just told me that you told folks, you told your peoples about our jingle that we have for you?
Well, I was at my parents' house, and my brother was in town, so it was like a big sort of family deal because the Eagles were playing. So that's
right.
that's a family
Don't tell
celebration,
me who won.
They didn't win. It didn't go bad. It didn't go well for the Eagles. Shush. We're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
That doesn't matter. Shush. That's the unimportant part. But I was saying, we're watching football, we're hanging out, but I've got to get back. I'm going to be talking to my friend Pete tonight. He has a show, and I was talking about the show and how great it was. And I was like, oh, but I have a jingle. And they were like, what are you talking about? I was like, there's a jingle. I have a jingle. And then I had to sing it for them, which I did. And they looked at me. I don't know. I mean, I think they were impressed, but mostly, it's family. So they just kind of looked at me like, stop bullshitting, Maura. Like, what's wrong with you? You've just made this up on the spot.
So you're there with your kinfolk.
My kinfolk, indeed.
I just wanted to say kinfolk. So do you want me to send you like an MP3 and you can send it to them, or would that be corny? You wouldn't do that now because you'd be like,
I'd absolutely send it to them.
Okay,
I think they need to hear it. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we
Absolutely.
should just.
Although I will say, the one thing I heard was like, so they really know you. And I was like, I don't know why they knew about the Bloody Marys. But yeah.
Well, it's a fascinating thing to have a public conversation every day or on a regular basis, because people pick up on little things and that they relate to, that they like. And at some point, I'm sure we were talking about brunch.
Yeah.
Or
must have been, clearly.
Or airports.
And it was right. I mean, it's accurate. It's correct. Nailed it. Absolutely nailed the jingle.
Yeah.
But I was very proud of myself for having one. Like, I did something. Like I had any part of it.
You did. You did. The jingles
I just exist.
The jingles are grassroots. It's a real, I always love that about the Howard Stern show, because there were such fans of the show, and they were super talented people, and they wanted to contribute in different ways to the show. And it's easier than ever now because everybody can record stuff and play stuff and send stuff. And so I just think it's the greatest thing in the world when people do or say anything about specific guests, for sure.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It has made my day. Like, I already said that, but now it really has.
Well, I love
it.
I do feel a little bad now because they're like, did you leave your family early to come home and talk to me? That feels either you use it as an excuse, which I'm happy to, but we didn't have to do it because it's like Martin Luther King Day. I already felt bad asking you. I wasn't sure if you were treating it like a Saturday night, but then there's a blizzard, so I thought maybe you'd be available.
Right. No, so it was snowing. So I needed to get out. Either if I didn't leave to come talk to you, I was going to be stuck there, which would have ended really badly anyway. Like, it's best that I don't be trapped in the house with my family. Getting out, like, you've done a service here.
Okay.
You've rescued me from that household, and I needed to not be there.
Okay. Well, anytime, like, by the way, moving forward, if you're ever with your family or anybody, you can use this show tapings as an excuse. We're doing a special about some things that just happened, and they need me over at the studio.
This is going to happen like during my work week regularly. I'm just going to be like telling my boss, like, oh, sorry, you know what? You asked me for something, and I will definitely get back to you, but I've got to go talk to Pete Dominic. So later.
Pete Davidson? So just before we hit record, you also were telling me about driving through the snow, and I'm not sure how bad it was there. So maybe I'm being a dick, but I felt like you were a little bit cocky and a little bit cocksure and a little bit overconfident about it. You're just like, oh, I'm just driving through the snow. And I'm like, no, I'm from Syracuse. You got to be careful. How bad was it? Or do you really think you're, impenetrable?
Well, no, look, what I said to you, and I will repeat right now, is that if there had been traffic on the roads, it would have been terrible. It would have been a very dangerous situation. But when there's no traffic on the roads, it's like a certain time of night, you're driving on a certain type of road where there's not going to be any other cars, and you're driving really slowly. It's like you're piloting a sled. It's just like, okay, it's not that big a deal. Are you gripping the road? Are your tires hitting surface? Absolutely not. No, of course not. Is that a good way to be in a car? No, it's terrible. But like, if there's not a lot for you to hit, it's kind of like, it's like bowling when you have the bumpers up, It's just kind of like, I'm kind of sliding here and there.
Yeah,
I'll hit a curb eventually. I'm going very slow. It's okay.
I don't know where you live, but do you live in the plains, like in the northern plains where there's no gutters or ditches, because while I agree with you, it's going to be safer if there aren't other cars coming at you or you get other people. But you're kind of at this weird arrogance, like there isn't trees and traffic lights. And granted, you probably aren't going to hurt another person who's maybe out for a walk. But where do you live?
Well, so the route that I was driving, it's like 2 miles from where I was going to where I live. There's, in that case, 1 traffic light. So we're not like dealing with a ton of traffic lights. It's very sort of suburban. No one is going to be on the streets. There aren't even like really cars parked on the streets. So if you're going slow enough, like you're not, there's like not a lot to hit. Again, very slow here, like very slow. But like, yeah, you can't really stop. But you can kind of slide one way or the other way.
It's not like it
so,
doesn't. You're not going to stop if you want to, but okay.
Look,
so
if all of a sudden like a tremendous like parade ran across my in front of me, that would be a problem. Like I'd be plowing through that. That would be like a situation where you'd be reading about that like in real time. You'd be like, holy shit, this is just what happened. But assuming that there's no one else out there, it's fine.
I think your first reaction would be like, why is there a parade? It's a Sunday in January and it's dark and cold. And
it would be really confusing, but like I would have time to tweet it because there would be nothing for me to do with the car. The car would be moving on its own. So I'd just be sitting there on the phone being like, I don't know why I'm plowing through a parade. They shouldn't be out here right now, but here's where we are.
Well, speaking of terrorism.
Oh, God. Yes.
I did want to ask you if, let's get serious, Maura. Okay. I'm glad you're safe. Please don't drive in the snow anymore.
Feeling real serious.
Well, did you follow the story about the synagogue? You identify as some parts Jewish, and I always feel like when these things happen, whether it's a mosque, synagogue, or a church, people feel vulnerable on those days. Like, man, that could have been me. That's crazy. And while we have all kinds of domestic terrorism and attempts seemingly every day and threats heard, that seemed like a pretty scary situation over the weekend. Did you follow it? Did you think about it? What are your thoughts on it, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I identify as all parts Jewish, really. But so definitely I was paying attention. I saw it. It was a very scary situation. And I was very, very happy that all of the hostages got released. I have to say, like, that seems so rare anymore, that something happened where there were no... Like there were no innocent victims. Right, I mean, I understand that the hostage taker was killed, but there was no one was taken victim and then was harmed. That seems crazy nowadays. Like it just seems like it always ends in these tremendous tragedies of that sort. So that alone seemed sort of almost mind boggling. In terms of it could have been me. I mean, like it's so tricky. I'm so a little bit like numb to this stuff in our country at this point that I walk out the door anymore kind of constantly feeling like something could happen. Like I walk into a grocery store thinking, yeah, no, a gunman could come in here. Sure. And so the fact that it happened to be targeted to a synagogue, I think anti-Semitism is real in this country still. I do not think that it is something that is outdated or overcome or it's gone. I think it still fully exists. But I do not necessarily feel as though being a Jew is even more terrifying now because this happened. It's to me exactly the same as it was and exactly the same as being in a public space of any sort is. In the same way that I feel like going into a movie theater is scary, going into a grocery store is scary, sending my children to school is scary. And yes, going to pray in wherever your preferred place of prayer is scary because the NRA still has this stronghold on our country and it's a terrifying place to be. So, that's the level in which that I was scared. It didn't sort of amp up the feeling of anti-Semitism in this country for me that already existed.
Right.
This wasn't like, oh, wow, see how strong it is. Like, no, I already knew it was bad. This is as bad as anything else. And at this case was a victory because people walked out alive and okay. So that was really nice to see. But yeah, no, it's frightening being in America at this point in time. It really is.
All good points. A lot of different perspectives to look at it from. And I looked at that story this weekend and I was just like, oh my God, who is this person? What do they want? What is happening? How is this going to end? And then I turned it off because it was Saturday.
Did you look up what the ask was? Who they were?
I couldn't
asking
find. I saw it was like one of those things where I was minding my own business, doing like Saturday stuff, and I looked at Twitter, and I saw that, and I was like, "Wait, what is happening?" And then it was too early; it had just broken. Like, so that they didn't have the suspect or what his demands were at that point. I just assumed it was, because they were Jewish. That's all I was coming up with.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. And I don't think that we have additional information at this point as to exactly who the perpetrator was or what the reason per se.
I guess he was some Muslim guy who's British, so no problem getting America, and he wanted some Al-Qaeda person released. I think that's what it was, and I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that is correct. But sort of the interesting thing for me was that it did actually lead me to look up the person that he was demanding be released.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you? I didn't do that.
Yeah, which was its own sort of rabbit hole, which I'm not through. I can't say that I have formed a definitive opinion on, but in the very cursory reading that I started to feel like, wait, why is this person locked up? What exactly has she done? She talked to the wrong people. She made it actually kind of led me down a sort of wait a second, is this someone who deserves to be locked up? Which is, deserves to be locked up is a tricky thing to say in this.
Well, there's so many political prisoners throughout history, and it could be a situation where, we shouldn't make assumptions that the person has been imprisoned because they actually did something wrong. And it's good of you to be curious and dig deeper down. And certainly I had before I said something while recording, but I'm not going to edit it out.
I didn't come to any conclusions. I didn't have enough time, but I certainly opened a certain question to me as to, we should probably be a little bit more thoughtful about who we are holding as political prisoners, and for what reason, and what people have actually done to perhaps bring that upon themselves. And I have a feeling there are a lot of people that don't deserve to be there.
Certainly, we've learned that in Guantanamo Bay. Obviously, prisoners all over the country and Americans, but when it comes to terrorists, but also you are kind of like a supporter of Al-Qaeda, right?
Would I say supporter or just fan of? You own one T-shirt. What does that say? It was a cool looking T-shirt, Pete. Okay. I don't know. I'm going to go for anything with those colors. It was a day. I had $15.
Free speech allows you to, if you would wanted to, even after 9/11, you could have worn an Al-Qaeda T-shirt. That I don't even think I ever heard of an Al-Qaeda T-shirt, but now I almost want to, at this point in time, I'm like, did anybody push that envelope that far? So
I'm sure they did.
I want to play. I hate to do this. I hate to do it. And you could actually tell me your thoughts on it in general when playing kind of Trump or anybody else on your platform, on your show. Are you just spreading the propaganda? Are you doing more harm than good? I usually think that's the case, actually. But this short clip is crazy because he's saying that white people are being persecuted. And this stems because of apparently they were prioritizing people of color for certain issues because they had been so disproportionately obviously affected by COVID, I think in some places in New York. Anyway, it's not really a controversial story, but if you just take whatever you want out of it. But are you ready? Do you get triggered easily?
I'll never be ready, but let's do it.
There we go.
Just denigrating white people to determine who lives and who dies. If you're white, you don't get the vaccine, or if you're white, you don't get therapeutics. It's unbelievable to think this. And nobody wants this. Black people don't want it. White people don't want it. Nobody wants it.
All right, I'm just going to stop it there. It goes on.
I love this. This is amazing. This is such a fascinating spin for him because he has gotten shit from his supporters for pushing the vaccine at all, right? You're not supposed to want the vaccine. The vaccine is bad. It's evil. we're supposed to hate it if you're a Trump person. And so what a tremendous spin for him. Like, he already was trying to be like, yeah, the vaccine's good because I developed it, right? Like, you should be on board. I'm the one who brought the vaccine. He already tried that angle. They booed him down. They were like, no, screw you. Vaccine is bad. How dare you? I love that he keeps trying. He's trying a new angle. Now it's just like, no, they don't want you to have it. I mean, it's really fascinating, that level of spin. No, you're white. You're not supposed to have it. It's only for the black people. That's interesting. That's probably going to end up getting more people vaccinated than anything else we've tried. More of these fucking assholes are going to be like, yeah, that's right. I'm not supposed to have it. Fuck you. Give me the fucking vaccine that you're keeping for all those goddamn whatevers, the illegals. I want it. That's probably going to be a more effective round of treatment. Not that I think that he's a good person, but Jesus, what an absolute lunatic.
You want
God,
more? You want more? You want 20 more seconds of him, or let's move on?
Oh my God. I mean, like, are you going to put him in front of me so I can punch him in the face repeatedly? Because then I want 20 more seconds.
It's not even believable. You saw this a week ago where it came out. Nobody can even believe it. They don't even talk about it, and they don't want to talk about it because they know it doesn't work very well for them. But the Wall Street Journal described the practice race-based preferential COVID treatment. So that's what it is. You get it based on race.
There you go.
That's amazing. I mean, like, first of all, I mean, like, there's the obvious shit, right? Of just like, yes, let's take the subtext and make it text. Yes, you're a white supremacist. We get it. We knew that all along. You might as well wear the cloak, except that, look, white is not slimming and this guy needs slimming colors. So, like, I get it. I understand why he's not choosing to wear the uniform, but like, we knew that's where he was going regardless. So that's not a surprise, but I do think it's really funny because I do think that his base just absolutely they don't want the vaccine. And now he's making them want it because they think now that the black people are getting it and they're not. That's fantastic. What an amazing spin.
Oh, I like it.
What an absolute piece of shit.
I love your interpretation of it. Because I didn't even see that. I didn't even think it that way. He had a ton of people in the background, a ton of black people wearing their Blacks for Trumps T-shirts. And so then they gave him cover. I saw even an interview with one of them that some right-wing media outlet that was allowed to be there as a propaganda, I would imagine, party. And it was crazy. The black guy for Trump. He's like, why do you like Trump? And the black guy talked for a minute and didn't say one thing. He just kept talking. He's like, we're out here, man. We love Trump. And then he really didn't say anything about why or what he's done or any. It was amazing that he could talk so long without anything at all meaningful. But anyway, race war. It is on in the race war. Yeah.
Look, I mean, I'm a Jew, so like, that's not a big thing. There are plenty of terrible Jews who are out there and they're going to like stump for Trump or anything. But it is nice, like, as a woman too, like, there are a lot of ways that I can go against the benefits or the like best interests of anything that I actually have, and then just like stump for these terrible people. And that's always in the back of my head, like if things are really down and out. Like if I'm in a place where it's like I'm going to be homeless, like I've lost everything, there's no chance of employment or like whatever. I just feel like there's always this option, right? Like I can just start going hardcore conservative right wing and then do something like, I have breathed freedom into a jar for you, buy it for $100 a piece. And like, suddenly I can afford rent again. Like, I feel like there's a lot of scams to be had there. And it's always in the back of my head that,
I don't buy it. I don't buy this one because I don't think you, certainly at this point in your life, or I don't know, did you ever, what's the job that you did or the thing that you did for a sustained period of time where you really felt like you were compromising your own kind of integrity because you couldn't actually do anything like that? You wouldn't last.
No,
I don't think you'd last a day.
I couldn't. The level of desperation I would have to meet to be able to do that is so tremendously tragic. I can't even really necessarily comprehend it.
And you would go, if things got that bad, you got 2 kids, you would go OnlyFans so fast before you'd go fascist.
Yeah, but then if OnlyFans didn't pan out, then what am I going to do? Like, I mean, you know, how old am I at this point? Like, what access do I have? Maybe that's not like, maybe that's a route, but maybe it's not. There's a lot of competition there. There's more competition in OnlyFans than there is in fascism, I think.
Now, listen, again, if I can make as much as I'm making on OnlyFans, you're going to be fine.
I know. We'll see. I mean, like, for me, I wouldn't do it. I'd live on the streets, no problem. But like, my kids need some some awful situation happens. They need a surgery. They need a whatever. Like, I'll do whatever. I'll do anything. So, you know, then I don't know. I'm not going to make any promises.
All right. Well, I guess Maura's going to be selling Confederate Bitcoin. Looking forward to all
I'm just gonna put Trump's face on my nipples, and then we're just gonna like meld it all together. Sort of like,
how do you monetize it?
Why don't we have like a patriotic OnlyFans, like an Only Patriots site where it's just like naked chicks who are just like conservatives, but are, you know, like they're putting like a little American flag over their pussy or something. Like
I don't want to make it serious, but the weird thing is like that is such an inappropriate use of the American flag. They get so fired up when, you know, you took a knee.
I know.
And like you can wear an American flag on your tits, and that's patriotic. But if you,
I love that. I love that because it's also like part of the code of the flag is to like not wear it in these sort of disrespectful ways, and they do it all the time. I love that.
Or use it
they just don't care.
In your campaign ads or any part of it, but like everybody puts the stars and the stripes and all that bullshit on their campaign ads, and so it's like you could you're basically saying you could wrap your dick in a flag and have sex on camera for money, and that would be a fine use of it because it's patriots only.
That's right. Patriots only. Absolutely. This is actually a really good idea, and you know what? I'm not going to do it. So if someone out there needs to, because they're at that point of desperation, I want them to take this idea and run with it. Please feel free.
I mean, do you have any idea how much money you're leaving on the table by not like, because there's got to be
a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of money.
There's got to be like a foot fetish and you paint your toenails American flags. That is cold, hard cash you're leaving, my friend.
Buy your own island money without a question.
Do you think there's any market for men's feet? Because I would do that. No one would know.
Sure. Of course there is. There's a market for everything.
Problem is, I think
how good are your feet, though, Pete?
A lot of people think that my feet look like that, like a children's feet, so they would be weird. Yeah, they don't look.
What does that mean?
They don't look like a man. My feet don't look manly or like a man's foot.
What are manly feet? Gross? Do they not look gross? Is that what we're trying to say?
I'm not saying that. Think they look like they're young.
I have no idea what young feet are, but now I've got to see pictures of your feet.
Tightly
like that's all.
Wrapped skin.
Please post them. Like they don't have hair. Like they're not wrinkled. Like what sort of baby feet do you have? Or are they just like adorable? Are your feet adorable? Do people see them and just want to tickle them and like Piggy go to market them like nonstop?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
One time I slept with a woman and the sheet came up and she saw my feet in the morning and then she quickly looked at me. She's like, "Oh my God, I thought I was going to get arrested." Forgot.
You have uniquely, like, I want to say pedo feet, but it's the wrong thing, right? Like you have jailbait feet. You have jailbait feet, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Okay.
What a strange, unique thing.
I don't know what to tell you. No one's ever. I want to keep hyping them so that at some point I can monetize them. I think that's the only way to do it. Just keep talking about them and keep creating a myth about my.
Are you kidding? Right now, I'll pay you money to see your feet, Pete. I'm on board. What are we talking about here? I'm hyped. I'm ready. I got some money to burn. I got like $2, $2.50 maybe.
Oh, these dogs are not ready to come out right now, but when they are,
all right. You keep it posted. Sign me up for your alerts.
I am laughing really hard with you right now. We did. I got to tell you, I want to tell you about our show. I wanted to use you to tell everybody about the show this weekend because you're awesome to talk about with anything and love comedy and are very funny. So we did, me, Ophira, and Christian did a show Saturday night near Norristown, Pennsylvania. And it's one of those towns. Do you know that area at all? Because you're from out there.
Like, I know where it is. You're not near me, unfortunately, or I would have been there in a second. It's like 2 hours away, but it's outside of Philly, right?
Yeah. Yep, I guess near King of Prussia, which is a weird name for a town. But anyway, Norristown, I said, had like more Mexican restaurants in it than Tijuana. But then you leave the town and then you arrive at the golf course where the comedy club is and it's all white people.
Yeah.
So it's like one
Yeah,
of
that
those
makes
towns
sense.
where it quickly changes from like ethnic, like you could see as the restaurants change. It's like where I live too, actually, to some extent, which I always is interesting to me. And so we're at now the wealthy white part. We're at the golf club where they do the comedy show. And we walk in, and I'm telling you, it was sold out, packed in there. It was amazing, but it was an unventilated like banquet room.
Mm-hmm.
And when I knew people were packed tightly, but Maura, when I got on stage, I could see them. They were literally, their shoulders were overlapping each other because the seats were so small. They were all against each other, completely unmasked. And it's been 24 hours and I've got no symptoms, but no ventilation, hundreds of people, like 200 people, shoulder to shoulder, not a mask in the place, or very few.
So what you're telling me is COVID is a hoax. It's just a hoax.
I'm telling you, it's the most vulnerable I have felt in 3 years. And
yeah, that's scary. That would be scary.
But we had to get out. We had to do the show. We had to
sell pictures of your feet. How is she going to do that? You got to show up in person. You know, people aren't going to buy it just from hearing about it. They got to see your face and know, like, all right, I trust this guy. I want to see pictures of feet. I understand. You got to make a living.
Yeah, they don't know about that. That audience didn't know about it. But it was wild.
No, that sounds scary. But you know, how was it? Was the audience like good? Were they excited, or were they like demanding blacks for Trump?
No, they were rapturous. All three of us did like one, like, kind of, interpreted divisive, I suppose, political at least to some extent. But none of us were like overarching, like talking about if I was probably more than them and I wasn't even that much. But no, I mean, it was rapturous. These people were so excited to be out, and we were so excited to have a hot audience, which, we don't get these days.
Yeah.
And at this point in the pandemic, people are they're just done. People are really, not everybody, obviously, but they wanted to be out and they wanted to laugh, and we brought the heat.
Very from your description, I'm glad I wasn't there because I don't currently want to die. But other than that, it sounds like it would have been really fun to be there. I'm sad I wasn't. It's
yes.
complicated for me.
Next time, you got to write 5 minutes and do 5 minutes. I mean, it would not be.
I've written many, many minutes, but the doing it is scary. I've only done stand-up twice now, I think.
We should we should do it. If you're afraid, then this is serious now. Now I'm being
want to. I do want to.
But the easiest thing for you to do would do like panel, meaning like the Tonight Show, where we have a pre-scripted conversation. I just set you up for these jokes, and it's less about being alone in front of a microphone and more about I'll still set you up for them. We should do those. Those would be really good, and you would crush.
All right, like I'm in. I want to do it like I want to do it more than I want to skydive. But to me, it's like the sort of thing that's terrifying but thrilling, and I'm desperate to do it. But also like, oh my God, you have to push me out of the plane, basically.
Let's go. I'll push you. I know that you don't want to travel too far though. So apparently.
I will travel when there's not, death awaiting me at the end of the travel.
We're going to have when death is not around every corner with a virus, we're going to have the stand-up community bazaar, and you'll do a whole thing. It'll be amazing. They'll be your people, I mean, like, it's a lot easier when they already love you.
That sounds incredible. The twice that I've done stand-up, I wandered into these open night sort of you just stand in front of a couple of people that have no idea. And they were terrible and they hated everyone. And I got some laughs and I felt like basically they should hand me a fucking crown on the way out. I'm like, I got some laughs. That's the best feeling I could ever have. I'm still going off of that. It was 4 years ago.
Yeah, it would be so easy for you because you're such a good writer. And I mean, how many times
it's such a big difference though, being a writer versus being a stand-up. Those are
not necessarily
such distinct skill sets. They are though. They really are.
Yeah, but you have the personality for it where you're a very animated storyteller. You're a great communicator. You know how to use inflection, and you already did it earlier here. You were hilarious talking.
You're right. I am fantastic. I forgot about that. You're right. No, I'm wonderful.
You should
just had a moment there.
Basically, that's also the name of your album.
I forgot I'm wonderful.
I forgot how delightful I am. It's also seemingly your actual core problem. I do believe, if gotten to know you as well as I have, your core problem is from time to time you do forget how delightful you are and you lose yourself. And you lose how much light you could bring to any room, and then all of our rooms get dark because you've forsaken yourself. That's not our fault. That's your fault.
This is so nice. How much are you trying to charge me for your feet pictures? Obviously, the price is going up, but I'm
telling
not sure
you,
how
these
much.
feet. You'll be like, "Are you? Wait, wait. I have to see if they're connected to your legs because those look like they're babies."
You just flattered me up to $10. I'm now willing to spend $10. Okay, like that's how good I'm feeling right now. So
listen. If that's what it's going to take, like all I have to do is flatter you, and my price for my feet pictures goes up somehow. Done. Here we go.
Yeah, that's called sales, Pete. Like that's what that is, right?
How
there.
much money
you
are you willing
feel good? They want to spend money.
To spend. So anyway, yes, that will happen. Let's make it happen. And
I'm
wait,
in.
Before I let you go, though, what was one more thing I wanted to ask you about from the weekend or from the week or from your life or from Twitter?
I can't wait to find out. I'm like wrapped here.
Trump said instead of supply chain, he said supply change. And he said, no one ever talked about the supply change. I actually have that as well, I think. I want to play that for you. I'm going to edit this long pause out. Oh, it's gone. Forget it. Anyway, Trump said supply change, and then tried to act like nobody ever talked about it. And I want to know, you've been thinking about this a little bit, as we all have. You know, prices are going up, and the shelves are empty. Everybody's saying the shelves are empty, and it's obviously a real thing, but it is everything to do, my understanding from economists I've heard and talked to and read, it's everything to do with COVID. And durable goods will eventually go back down. It would seem. We'll see what happens to prices, and we'll see if what happens with corporate profits. But the last thing I would say is, like, retail outlets. Trump said you couldn't get anything. Also, at his rally for Christmas, you couldn't get people presents. Retailers made the most money they've ever made. I think that's an actual true stat. Last November and December for the holidays, they made more money than they've ever made, and people didn't have any problem getting the presents that they wanted. I didn't even hear any anecdotes, but this is being demagogued, and I know you're talking about it with your organization. And what do you think about the true narrative?
I mean, there are definitely issues that are facing people right now. I mean, I think we hear a lot about inflation right now, which I guess is a problem. But the real issue is that you then look at these corporations and you look at what they're claiming as their profits, which, as you said, are record highs. They are making a tremendous amount of money. And then they are, because they have the opportunity, because there's a narrative out there that things, are hard to get and that prices are rising, they are able to use that to their advantage and jack prices higher and then make more of a profit. And so it's just this sort of unfettered capitalism being allowed to make things more costly for people, as opposed to the actual prices going up or actual problems being had. It's really a question of corporate greed, which is and has been entirely out of control and needs to be reined in, and can be through a number of different ways that are being discussed at the moment. But it's frustrating because obviously the Republicans are able to sort of spin this in this kind of like, oh, see, everything's bad when Democrats lead. And instead it's no, actually everything's bad when we allow corporations to just do whatever the hell they want, which they are. So it's very frustrating. It's nice to see that there are some solutions that are being discussed. There are ways to rein in corporations. I mean, even just from a really basic standpoint of Build Back Better, which I know people are talking about as though it is dead. It's not dead. It's still alive. We don't know what's going to happen per se. Maybe it'll be pared down. I don't know. Maybe it'll pass as it is. We just do not know right now. There's just not enough information. But one of the elements of the Build Back Better plan is this corporate minimum tax. And that will be a significantly beneficial piece of a way to kind of rein in some of these corporations being allowed to sort of get away with anything they want. But it is incredibly, incredibly frustrating and is also utter bullshit, frankly. It's just We're just looking at what happens when you let capitalism go, which is where we are right now in this country.
Yeah. And the Supreme Court, a lot of people have written about this, but there's so much to say about the Supreme Court decisions that have made it so much easier for big companies and influential industries to destroy people's lives, communities, labor protections. Most recently with this decision on OSHA. I mean, that was because of this conservative, federalist, socialist, Federalist Society Supreme Court, but they want to strike down any regulations that protect people. And as our friend Eric Siegel says, like roll back the New Deal protections.
Right. I mean, capitalism, I'm not really even arguing right now for a sort of system of economics or a system of government. I am not going to sit here and be the biggest fan of capitalism. But given that we are currently a nation that is capitalistic, at the very least, capitalism is a wild animal. It is a lion. It will absolutely destroy anything in its path. And so what we need the government for is we need it to cage it. We need it to declaw it. We need it to make sure that it is not harming people. We need it to act as the regulators at the zoo to make sure that that lion is kept behind bars and is very well controlled and cannot escape and kill us all. And right now we have a government that up to this point has been just letting the lion out, just go ahead, do what you want. And it needs to be controlled.
But before they let the lion out, the whole time it's in the cage, they pump it with experimental drugs so that when it gets out, it can eat way more than it could naturally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's got a unique bloodlust. So we're in a really dangerous situation.
Wow, I really do love that metaphor, and I'm glad I asked you about it because it's absolutely right. You know, if you don't have, it's not. I really wish we could get to that point where we could argue about the point that you made. Is I'm not arguing necessarily for some ideal economic system. What I'm saying is that if you have what we have now, and you don't have rules and regulations that are really strict and hard to get around, it will destroy everything, and it is, and it has.
Absolutely.
Oh, I wish we could.
No, we're in a terrifying place. We need to rein it back in real quick.
All right. Well, luckily, we do have photos of my feet coming everybody's way, and that will be the distraction that we all need.
I can't wait.
Feet, baby feet. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Maura.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. Maura Quint, how about it? That was fun and silly and interesting and introspective and ridiculous. Always love talking with her on Sunday nights and posting it for you on Monday. Always love hearing from you about it as well. Follow Maura on Twitter. Let her know that you enjoy our conversations at Behind Your Back. Almost every Monday, she joins me. And now I'm very excited to bring to you the author of What Would Google Do and Public Parts, How Sharing in the Digital Age Improves the Way We Work and Live. He's blogged at buzzmachine.com about media, technology, and life's irritations since 2001. He's the director of the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York, Graduate School of Journalism. He occasionally writes for The Guardian, for The Huffington Post. He's friends with Howard Stern, who he calls into his show regularly, and you can hear and see him every week on the show This Week in Google. Very excited to have the founding editor of Entertainment Weekly, the president and creative director of Advance.net, and so many other things. It's so great whenever I get to talk to the amazing Jeff Jarvis. Follow him on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis, buzzmachine.com. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, here's another great guest that I would highly recommend, simply given his name, that someone writes a jingle for him. You know, Jeff Jarvis, welcome back. Great to see you. But we have a lot of creative listeners that write intro jingles, and I think you are very deserving of one with how much time you've given us.
Oh, I would be so honored. So I'm on a podcast every week called This Week in Google on the Twit Network.
Yep.
And my lower third, it's become a joke that I have this horribly long title because I work at the Tao Professor of Journalism Innovation and director of the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism. So the listeners came in with first a barbershop quartet and then an entire choral version of saying Craig Newmark. Craig himself is delighted with this.
He is, of course, the guy the school's named after, that you teach at, and the founder of Craigslist. But ours won't be that layered. I imagine it'll probably be but it could be three listeners collaborate on the writing. Again, the name Jeff Jarvis does seem to have a fun thing to do.
Alliterations have opportunities, but a J is hard to sing, I would think.
Well, we will soon find out. I suspect.
Okay, good. I'm dying for this.
I like to throw it out there and see what happens. It's great to see. It's been far too long. How has your COVID journey been the last month through the holidays?
I think I'm going to be that last person in the cave who doesn't have it. Is my hope. I'll come out and say, "Is it still here?" Did you read Cloud Cuckoo Land?
No,
I won't do it. It's actually very good. I won't do any spoilers, but there's this kind of being the last person who doesn't have it is part of the shtick there.
Anthony Doerr?
Yeah, it's very good. It's a good book.
Well, what do you think? You are really good at analyzing the science as a layman, as a journalist, and kind of aggregated it. And somebody wrote a tweet. Virginia Heffernan wrote this tweet that hit me so hard. Something like, am I the only one that can't stop thinking about whether or not the Atlantic magazine thinks I should get Omicron now? So this is the question. At this point, we've avoided it. We're triple vaxxed. Fauci and others say everybody's going to get it. And I just want to get it out of the way so I don't have to cancel the plans.
No, I'm not that fatalistic.
Okay.
I'm going to try my best. My view and my wife's view is we've come this far. Damn it!
I get it.
Don't ruin it.
I get it, but there comes a point where you start to wonder about your work-life balance, your quality of life is what I'm saying.
I'm really happy with my work-life balance. I'm not commuting 3 hours a day. I'm stuck out here in the suburbs in a cave. That makes me happy. No. I don't want COVID to continue, but no, life is in that sense better. And I still want to avoid the damn thing.
Well, good for you then. And I hope that we can keep it away from Jeff Jarvis. I'm just saying, I'm ready for it. I don't think, because for me, the reason I say that is because I can't control my situation the way maybe you can, in that I have teenage daughters and one has a boyfriend and whatever.
They are always trouble. Always.
They have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And so I asked her, could you kiss, with like a saran wrap, some kind of a plastic? The weird thing is I asked her this long before COVID. That was what was really awkward. So it's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm mostly in the shed, but they're going to give it. They're going to bring it home, right?
What's the record been around your family and neighbors and friends?
In terms of who's getting it?
Yeah. Has it increased rapidly recently?
Yeah, for sure. Around the new year and just before and just after. And now I feel like I haven't heard it as much, but it's all anecdotal. But the numbers in my county have gone way up in Rockland County. So, but yeah, no, I mean,
I'm all of a sudden, I've got my April calendar is filled with optimists hoping to have events. There's a conference I go to in Italy every year. There's another one I go to in Texas, and I haven't traveled in 2 years, so to speak. And I don't know if that's too soon, but I'm hoping. What's it feel like for you touring?
I don't know.
You did outdoor gigs long ago. Now you're going to do real gigs. How nervous does that make you?
I'm nervous. I feel more nervous about the idea that someone would come see us and get sick as a result, because I'm positive we're not that good. But if it were Jim Gaffigan or Brian Regan, that's worth COVID comment. No, I mean, Ophir and Christian are hilarious, but I'm just at this point, I think live performers have to try to make a living. There's no more aid coming, and they're triple vaxxed, and asking that the audience be vaxxed seems to be like a moral, I can deal with that. What do you think? And
are people masked?
Yes.
Or they're all drinking, so they're not?
Yeah, I don't know at other comedy clubs and venues, but I think they will be at this one this weekend.
All right. I'm lighting a candle for you, my friend.
I appreciate it, buddy. What do you think about just Omicron in general and how this wave has affected the country and the exhaustion of it, the reporting of it, and the forecasting of it? A lot of people, including like Scott Gottlieb, admitted he got it wrong. He didn't think there was going to be another variant like this, much less one that spread so quickly, quicker than anything we've seen.
I think we have to be very careful not to think that this is mild. We don't know the full long COVID implications. Long COVID is real, and it sucks for a lot of people. So I think you still have to try to avoid getting it. We'll just see what it looks like on the other side of this swing. The people I have a COVID Twitter list. I follow a lot of experts, and that's kind of their view. Is we got to double down now. I switched to N95s. I was doing KN95s before. I've gone the full route now that I don't have to feel guilty wearing them.
Oh, there's two different type of 95 masks.
Yes, the KN95 is like what you buy to get so you can install lumber on this old house. The N95 is the medical one, and we were told not to wear these in the beginning days because there weren't enough for the doctors. Thank you, Trump.
I see what you're saying.
Now you could go to Home Depot. There's a doctor I follow online who I love, who's a cancer doctor, and she will call the Home Depot and find out whether they have them in stock for her patients and send them over to there to buy them.
And then the money from the Home Depot goes to the owner of the Home Depot, who pours it back pours it back into Republic campaigns to keep
Hey, capitalism. What are you going to do?
Keep COVID alive. What else can we say about Omicron, Jeff Jarvis?
Well, I mean, the other thing is interesting to watch. I've been refreshing Rupert Murdoch's Australian news sites, I hate to say, every few minutes to see what the news is on Jerkovic, the bozo who I hope they kick out of Australia. But you look at what's going on there, where they did shut down, so they did it really well. And they managed to avoid it at first, and they were zero COVID, but it came to get them. And now the whole country has been going through more shutdowns, and they're really upset. And they let in Djokovic. The court did.
And just to be clear, he's one of the top tennis players in the world. And this is the Australian Open is one of the top 3 tournaments. And it's a huge, huge deal for Australia. And so go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And last year they couldn't have the crowds, and this year they do. And they're hoping to get back to normal. And it's a great tennis tournament. And so he came in, and now he's being investigated in 3 countries, in Australia, Serbia, and Italy, that he might have, well, he did now admit that he made a mistake, that is, lied about not having traveled after having had, in the 14 days before coming to Australia. He he did interviews with journalists after he tested positive, face-to-face, and talked to others, and did photo opportunities with others, jeopardizing them. And Der Spiegel in Germany found irregularities with the dates on his certifications of when he supposedly was positive and when he was negative. So he might have lied to get in. And this SOB should be thrown out of Oz. And he could have avoided all of this by just taking the shot. To me, the anti-vaxxers say he's their hero. Well, I say he's the ultimate unhero. He represents all these jerks and assholes out there who won't take the vaccination.
I think it's dangerous and probably unhelpful to categorize people's ideology as always overlapping. But just between you and I, Jeff, it does seem like, because you were telling me about Djokovic and some of his views on things, there's a certain type of view that corresponds with anti-vax. The easiest way to say it would be conspiracy theories, and they believe a lot of other conspiracy theories too. I think if you only are worried about the vaccine and you're not questioning the science around any other medical science or climate or anything, then you're a little bit more reasonable. But still, this guy is apparently way out there, and it corresponds also with this kind of white supremacist anti-government
nationalism. So that's where it is. So, hey, it's just a sport. Like, people can can sing well and be assholes, and they can play well and be assholes. And you can separate the sport or the art from the person. Yeah, that's all true. But in this case, people should be using their celebrity for leadership.
Great point. And a lot of them certainly are, but too many of them aren't. What about the idea over at Spotify? Joe Rogan, that's where his show is exclusively. So if he says something that people are upset about, that's where you go to try to address it. He's been, they've gone after him for all kinds of different things he said, but now, like 270 doctors formed a coalition demanding that Spotify put some kind of warning on the show if he's interviewing a COVID expert or I don't know what exactly they're demanding. But what do you think of that from a standpoint of free speech, of media, and obviously public health?
Spotify is a private company, can do whatever it wants and has to take responsibility for whatever it wants. People are going after Facebook to get rid of stuff. Spotify has to take responsibility for paying him a fortune to spew what he spews. I think the minimum they should do is put a disclaimer up saying this is Rogan and he's doing it for attention, and beware. The maximum they should do is throw him off, or they're his boss insisting not do certain things. I know that's not censorship. Censorship is when the government stops you from speaking. That's what the First Amendment affects. This is a private company. No, I can't force you to have on a jerk on your air. It's your show. You can do whatever you want to with it. Spotify can decide the same you can, and they should make more responsible decisions. Now, having said that, I'm not in favor of government intervening and forcing anything or doing anything, and I'm worried about efforts to regulate speech in the United States, in Europe. And I'm not in favor of that, but I am in favor of responsibility. What do you, since you're in the same businesses, plural, with Rogan, what do you say?
My concern about such things is that it backfires, that anybody you label as a conspiracy theorist only perpetuates the conspiracy, and that the government doesn't want you to hear. Those are the kind of clips that seem to really go viral, whether they be on YouTube or anywhere. They don't want you to know about this. And that's why they're shutting us up, because the vaccine makers and pharma is making so much money. Of course, Jeff, which they should for making vaccines. That being said, they shouldn't be gouging, and it should be whatever. Right. I mean, I had Peter Hotez on this week, and he's the most moral vaccine maker.
That was the greatest.
Yeah, you saw that. You shared that. Thank you very, very much. But the point is, I worry that those types of labels, those types of censorship, makes people believe even stronger in the bullshit they're spewing. I don't know.
Yeah, we need more research about this. Facebook, put on fact checks on stuff and found that it was in some cases increasing the attention and traffic to things as a result. I think taking Rogan down is probably going too far. But for Spotify to at least have a corporate stance of where they stand and to expect that of them, I think is okay. And they can say, we think that he's wrong, but we're still giving him a voice, and here he is. So what's to complain about?
One of the things that always bothers me about every time I hear about Joe Rogan talking about anything medical science is I was on his show in November 19, and I pleaded with him on the record. I gave him all the information to have my friend Dr. Aaron Carroll on, who's one of the most respected researchers in the country. And I just always bothered me that he never even entertained it, because it's a recommendation coming from me, who's worked in media for years, and I'm a perfect person to trust to recommend a guest to.
But you and he are so different. You're trying to hear voices and take challenges and deal with those challenges. He doesn't want to be challenged. He just wants to be the challenger of getting attention. It's the attention economy. It's what the last century of mass media has given us, and we've got to figure out how to get out of.
I think it's certainly more about that. I don't know that he doesn't want to be challenged as much as he definitely wants to get as much attention as possible, and booking the most provocative people to say the most provocative things, such as Alex Jones. It certainly fits the type, and not all of his guests do that, including me. But I certainly did argue with him the whole time. But people like that. And I've never been interested in selling that media, but it does do well. I mean, hey, Greg Gutfeld is on top of the world.
Oh, F me. Oh, the least funniest. I mean, okay, as a comic and critic, he's just not funny, right?
Well, he's as funny as anybody in conservative media, but that doesn't say that much, really. I mean, the first time I ever went on cable news was on Red Eye on Fox, which he hosted, and I was on that dozens of times. I got to know him and his style really well, and what we did at 3 a.m. on Fox News was different than what he's doing now. But and the comedians that he has on the panel, and I don't know enough. I haven't watched it, but I know he's really cruel and mean and has said all kinds of horrible things that I think have done a tremendous amount of damage, and it's very disappointing, but it's killing. Just killing. That whole network, I think, seems to be doing really well, Fox. Ratings-wise.
But it's the devil. Rupert Murdoch is the devil. He is the single most malign influence in all of English-speaking democracy. And it's time that we stop treating him as a news or media entity. It is a propagandistic entity. The stuff that's going to come out in the January 6th committee is going to show how much of it's the ultimate in lobbying. It was running Trump. A student of mine just did a project, which is online, which she watched 80 hours of Tucker Carlson. For that alone, she deserves an A. Juliet Jeske, who put it up online, who analyzed the content of Tucker and OAN and a far-right crazy against NBC News and PBS, and looked at the topics, right? It's all the paranoid topics, but also looked at things like Tucker and his so-called experts. But just to your point about Rogan, never has on a real expert, has on people who have high school educations, not to besmirch that, but they're not exactly the people I'm going to listen to about science, and who they, not only what they say, but whom they choose to focus on and amplify.
I think everything you just said about Rupert Murdoch, first and foremost, I should be parroting that a lot more. I mean, he has, in fact, done more damage. People think about Roger Ailes, who founded and ran Fox News, but it's Rupert Murdoch who has founded all of these different media. And you said in the entire English world, in the UK and Australia, and, of course, in the U.S. And it's easy to say it's conservative media or right-leaning, but what it is as provocative as it possibly can be every minute of the day and in every way, including really attractive women and their legs and all, do as much as you can to make that thing be the thing that people need to, want to, or feel like they have to watch, or else and it's a cash rich investment. I mean, it's a gold mine.
And he single-handedly lobbies against the internet and the technology companies because he failed at the internet again and again and again, and because they compete with him. In Australia, it's far worse. In the state of Victoria, I think it is, he has a virtual monopoly on news. He's just buying up radio stations like crazy. That happened this week. Paul Rudd, former Australian
Rudd.
Prime Minister Rudd.
Kevin
Rudd. Thank you. Sorry. Has a campaign to try to get a monopoly investigation of Murdoch in Australia in Parliament. And he warns that what has happened to America is going to happen to Australia. If you go to skynews.com.au, it's not the Sky News that's in the UK. That's now separately owned. But the Sky News in Australia is Murdoch, and it's beyond what he does in his papers there. And it's pretty crazy stuff. It's very Fox-like. And so Rudd has warned of the Foxification of media in Australia. And of course, he was a major factor in Brexit as well, with the Sun and such. They supposedly just gave a $50 million contract to Piers Morgan.
And I'm looking at that Kevin Rudd thing in Australia. It could happen there. And yes. And now you bring in a guy like Piers Morgan. He's perfect at that. He's not as good. Thing is, Piers Morgan competed, I think, against O'Reilly when he was on CNN and O'Reilly was on Fox, or whatever the time slot was. And he was always critical of those guys at Fox, but he was really doing the same thing a little bit differently. He just wasn't as provocative as those guys were. And he was really on,
but he'll be as provocative as you want him to be.
Right.
I mean, he's a Rogan of sorts too. Yeah,
which is why by the way, which is why someone like him will always have a job, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah. That's the problem. And I don't know what we do about it. My argument is that I think we paid too much attention to disinformation. I think that we have to, that we in media think we do our job when we say, look at that thing that's wrong. Look at they're wrong over there. And we only do what they want us to do, which is to amplify what they say. And they're, as you said earlier, they're quite happy when we debunk them because that's an honor rule for them. Yeah. We have to get better at learning to ignore, to let things go by and not bring attention to them and not speak of them. And instead spend our time trying to highlight and amplify intelligence and authority and expertise. And we don't do that.
Yeah, I think someone said something similar to what you're saying. I just this week where we have to stop being distracted by the scandal of the day that usually a Republican says, like a Marjorie Taylor Greene says somewhere, and then we just go all flood over to it and get outraged by it. But
you mean her the attention she feeds on,
right? And getting distracted away from more important stories that we all in media should be focused on.
Exactly. We're not paying attention to the right parts of the pandemic. We're not paying attention to the death of democracy. We're not paying attention to what's happening because we're giving them the attention.
Although I will say, and somebody wrote that there should be a really premium focus on the democracy issue and all day, every day, and every single major media outlet. But I do feel like the major issues over the last few weeks have been Omicron, the January 6th, because it was a year, obviously, and the commission's investigation, as well as voting rights, which probably is the most important part of the dwindling democracy story, whether or not the Senate.
But how do they cover the voting rights, right? It's let's criticize Biden for his speech. Let's criticize Biden for not bringing along insane mansion and cinema. Let's make it about that rather than saying that there's 52 members of the Senate who will not support voting rights. And what do we do about that? I was thinking about this yesterday. I just put a post up right before I came on where I was going through some of my late mother's stuff, and we came across her World War II ration book. And it made me think that if we hear media all the time say that COVID is a war. Well, if we were in a war, then we'd be rationing things, and we'd be putting price controls and wage controls on, and we'd be taking over factories to make the tests and the vaccines, and we'd be doing other things. But instead, what media do is they set an expectation that normal's around the corner, normal's next week. And when we don't get there, they're going to blame Biden. And so that came to mind with coverage of inflation. So yes, prices are up 7%. Yes, that sucks. But we know exactly why. It's not because the economy is weak. The economy is extremely strong right now. We've had an extremely strong recovery. Thanks to the great gift of the internet, we've been able to stay in business in the midst of a pandemic. Of course, prices are going up. We can predict that. But what happens is that media sets an expectation. The expectation is that things are going to be normal immediately. And then when they're not, they say, well, it's Biden's fault. And it's going to hurt him at the polls. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And we don't help in my field. And I don't know what to do about it. I'm an old professor and, trying to figure out how to retrain people to do this. I hope I'm putting out a lot of revolutionaries who are going to go into places and have a fit, but we're not helping in media.
Well, it certainly always does come down to a funding model and what you cover and whether or not people care. We could sit here and do the best possible reporting on the most important stories, but if people don't click on them, then nobody makes money.
Yeah, but I also think that we're in a problem where I was having a discussion this morning.
Do you need me to simplify complex problems anymore? Because I can't. Let me know what else you need. I'll just minimize the entire problem in a sentence.
But the problem there is that we think that people won't pay for what we always gave them that wasn't very good anyway. So we should make them feel guilty to make them pay more to us for doing what we've always done the same way. We don't examine ourselves and examine how we can remake journalism and remake media now. So it's not, news has always been cheap. The century of mass media, news was the penny press. It was called that because it cost a penny, because advertising made it cheap. That economic base is gone. Yet what we do is now we try to charge a fortune for news that's not very good and put it behind a paywall for the privileged who can afford it. And what's that going to do to democracy? That's what's going to screw things up. So yes, you're right. It is right. It's the business model, and it's messed up right now.
And if we looked at how, going back to the issue of voting rights and democracy, so Joe Biden goes to Atlanta this week and he makes a ferocious speech where he compares anybody who stands in the way of voting rights to the racists of our past, whose names everybody knows, and then gets criticized for it from everybody, from Dick Durbin. Jake Tapper and Dick Durbin had a conversation saying it was basically too far, that type of language. Then you had my friends like Jason Johnson and Elie Mystal say, great speech, who cares, we need action. And more importantly, you had people like Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright and Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, Black Voters Matter, not show up for the speech and kind of boycott the speech. So it's like how we look at that and who we're blaming. And you already said it's all of the Republican senators, but apparently Lisa Murkowski. And then today it's Kyrsten Sinema come out and making her statement about the filibuster and seemingly sinking hope once again for voting rights. And then how that's looked at through the media lens and who's blamed for that. I have a hard time at this point blaming the Biden administration. I'm not sure what they possibly.
I agree. And it's this expectation from media. Well, he was supposed to be the great conciliator. Why can't get anybody? Now, on the other hand, why do we blame the Republicans? But and maybe I'm naive. I tweeted this. I saw you retweeted it right before we got on. I keep thinking if I were a certain kind of Republican right now, I'd say I could be the most powerful person in all of Washington. If I just said, let's talk. What's it worth to you? Yeah, maybe what the heck? I'll stand up and change it. I'm a lame duck. Trump already hates me. What the hell? I could get great stuff. I could get a great consulting gigs afterwards. I could be a hero.
Yeah.
Who gives a damn if Trump hates me? Well, okay.
Because the core agenda for there's no policy agenda. There's no platform for the Republican Party. It's only win elections. That's the policy. And so the
power for power's sake. Yes.
Right. And so the way to win elections is they don't have enough voters, so they got to cheat. So they pass this legislation to make it harder for people to vote, including arguably some of their own voters. So to go against that would be going against the only thing they stand for at this point, because it's not necessarily abortion and guns. Obviously the Supreme Court and courts matter to them. And we could talk about that really, but it really is just that's the only thing they care about. So you're not going to get a Republican senator, it would seem.
Yeah, right. That's the way they are now. But as an individual senator, be able to say, I could get the greatest pork barrel for my state ever by negotiating this. What's my vote worth to you? So everybody pay attention for Joe Manchin nonstop for the last 4 months. Wouldn't you think that an egotistical Republican would be jealous of that?
Do you think that this speech that President Biden made comparing any senator and anybody who goes against voting rights is like the horrible racists of the past? Do you think that was accurate? Too far? Not far enough?
Oh, absolutely accurate. And I would say this is an LBJ moment. This is the moment when you decide that you call racism and you do something about it. And this entire discussion, this is where media fails miserably. We don't talk about the racism. The fundamental part of all of this is racism. It's structurally racist. Critical race theory coming. Right? It's structurally racist. The Electoral College, the Senate, the structure of the Constitution, the authorship of the Constitution, Jim Crow, gerrymandering. It's all racist in its structure. It is old white men like you and me, I being older than you, who don't want to share power. They realize they're going to lose it, so they're going to burn the fields. They're going to burn down the democracy and hold on as long as they can. And you're right. They know they can't do it by legitimately getting elected, so they're going to be illegitimate for as long as they possibly can. They're going to play the game, and that is the rule of democracy. And they don't care because they don't stand for. It's not just they don't stand for policy; they certainly don't stand for democracy. And so this is the moment when an LBJ stands up and surprises people and says, I'm going to call this what it is. And I think that's what Biden was doing.
I'm feeling very defeated on this based on voting rights legislation passed based on Kyrsten Sinema. Everybody's been very focused on Joe Manchin, and Joe Manchin, of course, supports this law. I think his name is, he's a co-signer to this bill that obviously passed out of the House and is in the Senate being held up by the filibuster. But for her to come in today and say what she said, even though when she was, I guess, a state legislator, she supported getting rid of the filibuster. But I don't know where we go from here, I guess. If she's not going to, and all these Republicans except Lisa Murkowski, and even if Manchin votes to get rid of the filibuster, she's not going to. It just seems dead.
Yeah, and I think BBB is dead too, and so they're putting a stake in the heart of Biden, and so he becomes a 3-year lame duck against a Republican Congress that will try to impeach him at every turn. I can't imagine having to listen to Jim Jordan as the leader of anything. It's going to be awful. We will have had our 1-year Weimar Republic, and then we sink into Nazism.
I don't see how it can change at this point right now. I based on this one thing, the Senate. Yep. What do you make of the argument that a lot of people say if the Democrats get rid of the filibuster now, then when Republicans take power, they're going to make abortion outlawed across the nation, not just in certain states. They're going to do whatever they want. If Democrats do it now, they'll make it so much worse.
They've already done it. They were going to do it anyway. They're going to get rid of the filibuster to do whatever they want. So why don't we get rid of it to do as much as we can now? And the main thing we're trying to do is to save the democratic process of elections. Without that, we have nothing. So, this is really depressing talking to you, Pete. Glad to see you.
Well, we could talk about that COVID issue with penises.
That's a Murdoch story.
Is that right? What is it? What is it?
So we've heard about this before, but there was on the front page of Murdoch's Australian rags, he had a story that a man's penis shrunk after getting COVID. But what I loved about it was that the man said that before it was unusually large. And so if you remember the great Seinfeld episode of George getting out of the pool claiming shrinkage, COVID is the new shrinkage. No, it was big. I swear it was big. It's COVID. No, I got lots of testosterone. I take Super T all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. See, they got us back out. Well, yeah. I mean, who knows? I always am an optimist. I want to make things.
Yeah, I am too.
I mean, especially on such an issue as voting, but it's tough. It's tough to.
It's hard to compete against cheating.
It's such a great point. How do you beat a cheater? How do you beat a cheater if so many people are okay with cheating as well? I mean, there's so much of that. There's just so much of. And
we have an evil manipulator behind the scenes in Murdoch and his people, which includes Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and company. And fine. There's idiots on Facebook. There's been idiots everywhere. There's been idiots in every bar in the country spouting idiocy. I'm not so worried about that. What I'm worried about is the media influence that exists.
What did you think of Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci this week?
I thought, yay, Fauci, finally, fuck it, fight back, call him what he is.
Yeah.
And then the open mic moment that Fauci had with another person calling him a moron, I don't think was an accident at all. I think Fauci has finally said, screw them all, and I'm delighted, and I'll live vicariously through it. Rand Paul is the jerk of jerks, and Fauci gave it to him. What do you think?
Well, I thought it was certainly satisfying to see Fauci stand up to him. And it's just, it's hard to watch public health experts have to fight back like that because they're not that good at it. And they don't think it's good for them to do. They don't want to get, and I did a special show with Dr. Michael Mann and Peter Hotez at the same time. And both of them talk about their hesitancy. They didn't get into science to fight this kind of political fight. They're not necessarily prepared for it. Both of them are, I think, pretty good at it because they have too much experience. But I kind of felt bad seeing Fauci have to turn into that guy and defend himself that way because you want people in those positions to be, as apolitical as possible. And they usually do a pretty good job of taking it.
I think enough of that. We have mollycoddled these jerks, assholes, fascists, and liars enough.
Yep.
Well, it's not going to do anything. You're not going to convince anybody that way.
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
They are already destroying the democracy. It is time to call them what they are. And plus, it's all the better in Fauci's accent.
Yes. Yes.
$20.
His New York.
Even $100.
Yep. It was great. It was really.
Kill Dr. Fauci. It was beautiful. It was
clip
better.
Really got a lot of views. Boy, did that clip. All right. Last thing maybe we could talk about is the January 6th commission. It's been a year since, and they're doing their investigation, and there seems to be it's very hard to keep track of and cover because there's a lot of developments that seem to drip out all the time. Sean Hannity is texting the president, and there were these plans that were drawn up, and today we've got big news that the FBI arrested the leader of the Oath Keepers and several others. And I think that's a good thing. And they're charging them with a law that would apparently make them insurrectionists. They're charging them with sedition of some sort. And you know what I'm talking about? Can you explain that at all?
And as Kevin Cruz, historian, said when he put up a picture of Tevye, sedition. I enjoyed just hearing the word. Made it a serious charge. Finally, we're getting up to some leadership. I mean, we got to get to the real leadership here, but fine, some leadership and charging them with crimes that could yield 20 years in prison. Bravo! Finally. My hope is. I mean, the question is. We also I don't think I say we, I'm being presumptuous here, but I think folks that I talk to are less than enthralled with Gorsuch. He could stand a little Fauci in him, be a little more direct, and so we're worried, I think, about whether or not he's going after these people. My hope
you
is
said
that
Gorsuch.
he is.
You said Gorsuch. You meant Garland.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Jesus,
Yep.
I'm being an old man today. Yes. No wonder you look confused. Is our Department of Justice going to go after these folks? So this is the first big sign I've seen that they're going to take this as seriously as they should. That makes me happy.
DOJ also announced a new department agency initiative, maybe it's easier to call, yesterday, which is a well-funded part. I mean, I say they should have had this after or before McVeigh, but basically the FBI, charged now with looking into domestic terrorism. The question, I don't want to be conspiratorial, is how many people that work in the FBI are sympathetic to the cause of the far-right extremists, and that's a fair question, unfortunately, that we have to, ask and answer. And you didn't have to really worry about that. There was always one guy in the FBI, might have been a double agent working for the Russians. I can't remember anybody who was in somehow cahoots with a jihadist. But good Lord, this is the United States of America. This is our DNA. There's no doubt that there's a problem in law enforcement, the military, and I'm sure
too. Right.
At the FBI as well. So it's like,
yeah. Yeah, and how close we came on January 6th. I forget who it was. I think you covered it a few weeks ago when one of the military people said that they didn't want to get it to the White House because of the fear of what the White House would have told them not to do.
Right.
And how close we came to that occurring is all the more frightening.
All right. Well, let's end on something fun.
Well, so
tell me about the young people.
So Elon Musk's satellite service, the dishes have a heater in them so they don't get iced up, and so they can keep on serving it. And cats have discovered this, and cats are sitting in the satellite dishes, blocking the signal and the internet. That made me happy. Cats win.
Because it's Elon Musk?
No, just because it's
cats.
I'm
going to look that story up and include it. Thank you very much for joining me, as always.
Always a pleasure.
I love talking to you. I'm very excited to see if there will be a jingle created. I highly recommend it for Jeff Jarvis.
I'll bribe them.
But I don't run such things. And I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, there he goes. Everybody, the great Jeff Jarvis, at Jeff Jarvis. Go follow him. Let him know that you heard him here on the show, as well as Maura Quint at Behind Your Back. And thank you for tuning in to today's podcast, downloading it, tell your friends about it, sign up for it. Go to standupwithpete.com right now. Subscribe on YouTube as well, and TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I have 150 followers. I'm gonna start plugging TikTok. I have to get to 1,000 followers or something like that before I can go live, and I'm gonna start going live on TikTok. Are you on TikTok? Follow me. I think it's Pete.Dominic. All of the links to my stuff in every day's show notes, as well as my guests and contributors to the show, like Pete Coe and John Carroll, who's singing us out right now. Scheduled to talk to Barry Ritholtz tomorrow, Jared Yates Sexton, some great new guests as well this week. I'm very excited to introduce you to if you don't already know them. If you have a good idea for the show in any way, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Join our community. Hang out with us on Thursday night. Goodbye.
Stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.